Welcome to the podcast. We have a special guest here today, Chip House. He's a four-time CMO himself of B2B SaaS companies. And we're going to talk through everything. We're going to talk about the viability of the MQL. We're going to talk about lead scoring. We're going to talk about alignment with sales. We're going to talk about the proper forms and uses of content, what Chip is doing differently these days, sparking conversations, what he's testing. This is an action-packed episode, so stick around. I'm excited today because we have a four-time CMO with Chip House here, and those have all been inside of B2B SaaS companies. So Chip, you've got a lot of experience, wealth of perspectives, and if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of an introduction about your background, and then we'll jump into some of the juicy content and the topics we want to talk about today.
Yeah, Steve, well, thanks for having me on. Super excited to be here. And, it's scary, but I've been in SaaS now for over 25 years, definitely aging myself. But in 97, I started at a little company at that time called Digital River, an e-commerce vendor in Minneapolis here. And have been in SaaS ever since and just kind of climbing the ranks of marketing. And as you mentioned, four-time CMO. So I have lots of opinions. So happy to share them with you.
Well, fantastic. Well, we were just talking about one right before the recording here that is, I think, germane to everybody that's listening, all the CMOs out there and B2B marketers, and that is the so-called death of the MQL. I mean, you wrote an article about it. Gartner's talked about it, Forrester, McKinsey, all the top business publications. Maybe tell us a little bit about just your opinion on the MQL, death of the MQL, how you define it. What's your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of main things there. And the LinkedIn post that I did on it was actually a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I don't 100% believe it's dead, but I think it's mostly dead, as they say in The Princess Bride. It's mostly dead. And the reason it is, I think marketers have largely abused it in many ways and have had the wrong goals kind of foist upon them, or they've accepted them, trying to justify their worth top of the funnel with saying, here's how I'm counting and showing you that I'm doing stuff in marketing is this MQL count that I have for you, which is a very, especially in B2B, is often the first thing at the top of the funnel that you're counting. Maybe above that, you're counting prospects or leads or whatever specific funnel methodology and language you're using. And the interesting thing about a marketing qualified lead is often marketing gets to define what it means, right? So you can kind of game your own system. So that's the first thing that I think is of concern. The second thing is it focuses the marketer purely on the top of the funnel. Not that a marketer necessarily shouldn't have some top of the funnel goals for their reach and the number of people that they're appealing to with their advertising, their organic content, et cetera. But they need to be curious. They need to look down funnel, so to speak, in every channel to see what is really happening with those leads. Because, as many people have realized now, it is no longer a game of marketing, creating awareness, and then throwing the leads over the wall to the sales team. It has to be a very joint process where you're building demand over time with a set of accounts, and then hopefully encouraging those accounts to raise their hand and opt in, request a demo to the point that there's some level of brand affinity and they know you, they like you, they trust you to help solve their problem. And at that point, they're more likely to be open to a sales conversation. And I think a lot of this has evolved, Steve, over the past several years too. The B2B state of buying has not stayed static in the last several years because of all of the technologies that have existed out there or been created over the past several years, and maybe just work habits. And, some of us old timers are aging out that, don't mind getting on the phone. More and more people hate getting on the phone, hate filling out forms, and they're going to get online and they're going to do their own research. And so in a complex B2B sale, you've got multiple different stakeholders inside of an organization that are doing their research online. And it might be, 20, 30 steps before they're kind of, ready to have a discussion with anybody. And so anyway, that's a long way of saying marketers need to move beyond MQLs, partner with the sales team and get curious what's really happening down funnel. How do your advertisements and efforts by channel convert to revenue down funnel?
So you brought up two really interesting points in there. One is you said, people hate to fill out forms, right? And I think the stats on that are that literally only 3% of people in that buying group are ever going to fill out a form, because we know we're going to get, retargeted. We know that it's going to come with a cost. And so the vast majority of people are never going to raise their hand, right? Mm-hmm. They're never going to say, I'm a marketing qualified lead because I just gave you my name, phone number, email, right? And so the first part is, okay, what about the other 97%? Right? If they don't fit the typical definition of an MQL, how do you establish that relationship? How do you target them? How do you work with them in getting them into and through the different stages of the funnel if they're not doing the traditional raising of the hand?
Yeah, it's so true. I think a number of marketers have pointed out that, part of the reason maybe the era of the MQL is gone is, sales no longer needs marketing to get contact information for a lead, right? They can use tools like ZoomInfo or Apollo or Seamless or whatever to go get contact information and reach out to people, and augment it with tools like 6sense or Terminus or Bombora to get intent level data, right? So who actually might be in market for your kind of product. But here's the challenge, and it's not a super easy challenge to solve, frankly, for CMOs, especially, and I'm in a B2B SaaS world, because if you have an SDR team, they are quote unquote hungry for leads, right? And a lot of sales teams, I think it's just human nature. It's easier to have marketing give you a lead than to go create your own, right? And so you take the path of least resistance, to do that. So MQLs and counting MQLs become sort of utils of work, for a BDR team, so to speak. And so it is harder when you move away from that, if you're kind of built your funnel around counting MQLs, moving to more of an ungated approach where you're trying to reach more potential buyers and engage more potential buyers and help them, again, know, like, and trust you, and feel like you understand their pain and that you can solve it. But you can't always count that engagement, right? A lot of it happens in the quote unquote dark funnel, right? Them sharing something offline, them reading about you in an article, them listening to a podcast, them watching this, and learning about Insightly that way, whatever it might be. That's how buyers learn about things these days. And a lot of it happens in an unattributable manner. But that doesn't mean that marketers shouldn't be there. Marketers really need to think about all the different places that their buyers could be and trying to engage them there where they are.
So that brings up an interesting topic then, like the role of the SDR, right? So some companies can attribute up to like 60% of their pipeline from SDRs. They're just out there and they're going, cold, they're following up, they're getting their own list, and versus, marketing teaming up with SDR. And there is a trend where more of the SDRs are reporting into marketing, right? And so there's two different, opinions there. What's your opinion? on SDR and maybe following up on MQLs that aren't defined by, form fills, but defined by all that, not in the dark funnel, but the explicit and implicit engagement that we can track and say, look, here is somebody who's engaged. This isn't a cold lead. They need that personal touch. They need that relationship built. They need to be conversation ready. Like, what's your point of view on kind of where SDRs should sit in the organization and what they should be doing?
Yeah, you're right. And you point out, Steve, that a lot of SDR/BDR organizations are now reporting up through marketing. Some report up through sales. I can think of pros and cons for each scenario, frankly. Often a business path for an SDR will be up through the sales team rather than the marketing team. And, they want to be sort of closer to those mentors and those leaders and be part of that organization and team potentially to best further their knowledge in their career. But, functionally, they more align with the top of the funnel, right? With what marketing is doing and the messaging marketing is using and the language that it uses or that they use to kind of trigger a response in an SDR cadence is very similar to a marketing email, right? Or maybe a social ad. And so there's a lot of benefit for marketing being very tied into the pulse of the SDR organization. But in terms of where it reports, I think it more has to do with your specific organization. And if you can partner closely with sales and you have good rapport with the SDR leader, I don't think it necessarily matters whether or not they report to you. You just need to be closely aligned with them. So that's how I think about that.
Maybe talk about that alignment. I mean, alignment with sales is a hot topic, right? And the disconnect between marketing and sales. And so how do you get aligned, and then how do you enable? And what's your perspective after been there, done that number of times? How do you create that alignment?
It has to be very deliberate, and it has to start with your heads of marketing and sales. And I think it was before I even started this role, I was connecting with Dave Osborne, our chief sales officer, right? And we talked about alignment and just how we thought about go-to-market and the fact that we need to be aligned on ICP and channels and all those other things. And so we've deliberately created those communication connections. So it includes, we don't have a sole rev ops team. We have a marketing ops team and we have a sales ops team, but they function like a joint rev ops team per se. We share spreadsheets around goals. The goals we have and KPIs are in common. We're building SDR quotas and sales quotas together. And that's a lot of it. It's just very deliberate alignment around goals and ICP and go-to-market. I think the thing I would add onto that is adding in the cadence of the meetings, not just for you and say the head of sales, if you're a CMO, but also ops to ops, demand gen to ops leaders. And then we also do a weekly touch base as well. And the other thing that we do is we sit down on a regular basis with our CEO and run through our pipeline, and that's me and the sales leader. And so you bet we better be aligned when we're having those conversations, or, it's easy to call BS pretty quickly. And so, so I want to go back to one thing you said about MQLs, because there is the one place where there is still a ton of validity, and we leverage our own marketing automation capabilities to score leads, right? And so we are still doing lead nurturing, through our journey mechanism and scoring those leads. And, I think it's changed over time when we engage the SDRs to reach out at what score, whether it's initially or when they, reach a certain score. And that kind of depends on the resources you have or what channels they come in for. Because that's the number one thing to say about MQLs is they're not all created equal. Depending on what you're counting, a demo request hand raise from somebody who has, digested your podcast and your marketing messages for the past year is very different from a high quality lead that you got via content syndication or something like that, right? They're two different planets of engagement, frankly.
So, lead scoring is one of those things that if you ask 10 different CMOs, what's your lead scoring methodology, you get 10 different answers. There would certainly be things that are, that are common, but what's your philosophy? Not only are you charged with, making sure that lead scoring is correct and evolving over time, but your tool is designed so other companies can do lead scoring through Insightly. Mm-hmm. So you have kind of a product perspective and a marketer perspective on this that most CMOs don't. Like what's important? What should we be taking away from this call in terms of that lead scoring? Because that is a tipping point, right? When things happen, right? Thresholds are met. And so just a little bit about your philosophy of how you look about, lead scoring and what you could share with us.
Yeah, I think it's lead scoring is a model that you build and customize for your own organization based on your ICP and who you're trying to reach and the level of engagement required, before they talk to a sales rep, basically is what it is. And you get to decide what elements are important, right? How do you score for things like title, right? If they're a director versus a C-level, are those different scores, right? And in most organizations, they would be, right? The size of the organization or the industry in, those can also be triggers for how you score things. And I think they're all important and relevant. And I think most marketing happens effectively when you can really dial into who buys your product and who is making the decisions inside of the organization. And if you build your lead scoring around that, you're going to have a pretty good model.
So I'm going to step back. I'm going to ask more of a general question.
Yeah.
4 times in as a CMO, you've got a lot of opinions. What are you most proud of that you're doing right now as a CMO?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. Well, it's funny, you learn this game sort of slowly over time. And honestly, marketing has changed significantly over the past 25 years that I've been in SaaS. It used to be there was just marketing, and then there was digital marketing, and direct marketing. And now just, the number of things that marketing is responsible for is crazy. And I saw the meme recently where you had, the lions of Lion King looking over the valley and said, all of the areas the light touches, we're responsible for. But there's an element of that's sort of true. So I guess what I'm most proud of is with my current organization is the fact that I feel like I've built a really strong team, and that team gets it because a lot of them have been there before too, whether as content leaders or demand gen leaders. And a lot of them are younger than me. Some aren't. And I feel like they have a better pulse on what's, how buyers buy today, frankly. And so we set out early on to build strong content, right? I think if you had asked me a year ago how I was, before I knew anything about Insightly, or a year and a half ago, I would say, I want to build an in-house capability that produces awesome content that that our potential buyers can consume and get value out of. And that might be thought leadership content. It might be content that's very product oriented and feature function oriented, but we have to do all of that, I think, to engage the potential buyers. So, almost a year ago, we launched a podcast and YouTube show called Closing Time. We're almost at our 52nd episode, and we decided to engage influencers that had a following on LinkedIn that spoke to our ICP, which is primarily go-to-market teams. And we started talking about go-to-market and things that our ideal customers care about. And that's been super successful. The amount of engagement we've driven that way has been strong. We're leveraging the content organically on our website as SEO. We're leveraging it also in paid ads as well. And it's achieving strong engagement there as well. And, it's clearly a very high funnel kind of activity, but it works also phenomenally well for retargeting, we found, right? Just being able to engage people with something that relates to the product you offer, that's not specifically the product you offer. And again, it's part of John Jance's funnel, which is that know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, refer. I mean, that's the funnel that I love the most, because it really speaks well to how buyers engage with you these days and have to trust you before they're ever going to do business with you.
Yeah, and trust, that's a good point. Trust is not built off of product feature benefit statements.
No.
Right?
Yeah. You earn that trust over time, I think, by producing great content.
Well, it's interesting because when I asked, what are you most proud of, and content is basically in the production of content and how that builds trust and that funnel. I obviously believe that. My company's called Content Strategies. You talked about two different levels of content there, and you called out thought leadership content. Could you give us an understanding a little bit of what your idea of thought leadership content is, and why you called it out, and so therefore why it's important?
A big piece of my career, an area of my career that I'm very proud of is the 12 years that I spent with ExactTarget, which at one point I was hired by the founders in 2001 at ExactTarget, and we were 10 people basically. And so I was at that email marketing company, and from whatever 20,000 a month, to 350 million a year when we were acquired by Salesforce. And when we were doing thought leadership content in 2003, 2004, we didn't know that's what we were doing, right? We were just talking about the email marketing space and what things marketers needed to think about to optimize their campaigns, whether it was complying with canned spam or increasing open rates or click rates. And so, I think thought leadership has an element of best practices, but it has an element where you're ahead of the curve a little bit, where a lot of people are here, and thought leadership tends to be, based on an informed scientific opinion. Where's the ball going? It's the whole Wayne Gretzky, where's the puck going to be, rather than right where it is. And I think that's what thought leadership is. It's an informed opinion about where the puck's going to be.
And that's so important because, our buyers today, they want to know that we know their business. And we know, therefore, then what we do, our technologies, how it fits in now, how it fits in tomorrow, where the industry is going, where the technology is going, right? So on that front of kind of thought leadership and being that trusted expert, as a SaaS company, right, it's different than any B2B marketer. We have data, right? Deloitte called SaaS companies the foundation for digital transformation, the difference between the business of today and the business of tomorrow. As a SaaS company, what do you think are the opportunities, the benefits? Because we're SaaS CMOs that are listening in today. What's different between a B2B marketer, an ABM B2B marketer, and a ABM B2B SaaS marketer? Like, what kind of advice and perspective would you have that would be different there?
Can you give me the contrast again, Steve? What the difference between?
We're SaaS companies, right?
Yeah.
As a SaaS company, we're technology, and we deal with data, right? Versus any B2B marketing company that isn't necessarily a technology company.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
As a SaaS company, what does that mean for us when we're marketing, right? When we're trying to promote our companies? How would you look at that different than if you were the CMO of more of a traditional non-tech, non-SaaS B2B company?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think I need to try to proactively, and I've tried to do this, kind of get out of my own echo chamber that I'm in, because I feel like I'm very much in a B2B SaaS echo chamber, on LinkedIn, and just by being in SaaS for so long, it's just kind of how I think. So I realize it's a bit of a liability, and why, it's helpful to talk to customers, whether they're in the manufacturing space or the financial space, or advertising agencies, that we're talking to about partnerships, things like that. But I think it's, when I talk to, we have a lot of customers who are in the solar space, right? And it's really fast growing space. And they love Insightly because they could kind of manage the whole of their customers' journey on the platform, right? Kind of from their marketing, their selling on it, their servicing their customers when the install on their roof happens, and then they're managing that project. And that's a super real world journey, that a company deals with, which frankly, many offline, quote unquote, offline businesses now function like SaaS companies, because they're engaging with their customers online via email, via text. They're using scheduling mechanisms or apps and things like that. So it's almost, the digital transformation to me is here, even though you maybe have 20 to 30% of companies that we still talk to that are managing their customer relationships on a spreadsheet, which, still happens in 2023, which, by the way, is great for us. I guess there's still people that want to buy CRM. But I don't know if that's all that different. Maybe that's, there's a lot more commonalities than differences, I think, Steve.
Well, what are some of the things that maybe are new? I mean, we're post-pandemic, right? Where people are talking about the normalization that's happening now in 2023 into 2024. What are some of the things that are new that you're doing, or just focusing more on, than we have in the past?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think just the concept of influencers in a B2B setting is a little bit different. I remember first pitching that to the CEO and to the board and things like that. And it's like a different muscle. It seems, instantly people think of ShamWow or something, some sort of, B2C influencer who's engaged out there doing, cable TV or something. And so, but I think there is a real role for thinking about who are the influencers in your space in B2B. So that's something we're thinking about differently. I think the second is that ungated approach that we already talked about, just truly thinking beyond the form fill, and how can I engage my buyers in a meaningful conversation that helps them along their buying journey, and so we're using different ways to do that. A lot of the content on our website is ungated. We do still gate some critical content, which we still find important to do in certain scenarios. But we've also leveraged something from Drift, where it's sort of a conversational landing page, right? Where somebody shows up on a landing page and up comes the bot right next to it. The content's entirely ungated, but they can easily engage with your bot or with a rep from Insightly if they want to, just off to the side there. And so that's something that we're trying out that's showing a lot of promise as well.
Yeah,
and
Drift, they talk about conversation ready, and they, instead of MQLs, I think it's conversation qualified. They have a different definition, right? They've done a lot of studying on this, and obviously they're one of the leaders in conversational marketing.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So how many pages do you have this kind of conversational format? Are you testing it?
We're
or
testing it right now, actually. Yeah, kind of head to head against other formats. So I have about 6 different content pieces that way. So I think the other thing that we're doing is sort of similar. We're doing an ungated demo videos on our website as well, and trying to see, hey, am I actually helping people on their buyer's journey, or am I quote unquote stealing from my otherwise demo requests? Because that's the immediate, suspect of a lot of people, is that maybe you're stealing potential demo requests. But like, I would argue that you're making it easier for the buyer to engage and learn about your product, and ultimately that should pay off down funnel.
I mean, that's one of the big differences of a SaaS company, right? It's like, it's all towards a demo, right? All paths lead towards a demo. So that's a big question, right? I literally went through a funnel path with Zoom Info recently, and I signed up for a free trial, which put me right into a funnel where a salesperson, the email said, fantastic, we'll get right back to you and schedule your appointment. I had no idea, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate in like gating that they're doing, right? So there is a difference between, how much of our products, how much of our technology do we want to be self-serve versus an advisor that's taking us through that. One of the last things I want to ask here, when I asked about, what you were most proud of, and you talked about content, if you could
I talked about my team too. I'm actually probably most proud of my team.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. But that team effort is around content, right? That's how we establish relationships. If you could put on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of importance to Insightly in the growth of the company, 1, content, not important at all. 10, vital. Like, where would you put that rating?
Yeah, it's closer to an 8 or a 9, right? It's right up there in terms of importance, right next to the product we build. I think it's because both of those things are probably most tightly aligned to our brand. Why do we exist? Who do we help? Why should somebody consider us for solving their problems? All relate to what product do we offer? What does it do? And what do we believe? Right. And so I think ultimately, as a marketer, you're trying to find more people that believe what you believe. And, we believe, a lot of companies are paying too much for CRM and using too many resources on it. And they need a more modern CRM that they can manage themselves and not spend all their resources on. Right. So that's sort of what we believe. And we want other people to believe that as well. And content gets us there.
I like that. Aligning with it, because you're not going to align with everybody. No company is right for every buyer, right? But if there's a belief set that's common, now you found common ground, right? Well, fantastic. Is there, just before we sign off here, is there anything, last words to wisdom, or anything that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think SaaS CMOs and SaaS marketing people have their job cut up for them, right? And it's an ever evolving discipline. And I was just responding to a LinkedIn post that I saw this morning that was sort of bemoaning that a little bit. Like, here's all the crazy stuff that we're responsible for when our CEOs and our boards don't get it, so to speak. And I think it's an opportunity. I mean, I really do. And we are earning our PhDs in this by doing it, and so I think my final thought is action over inaction in everything will lead to learnings, which will lead to improvements. So action over inaction, good is better than perfect. And those are some of the values that we've even talked about as what are our marketing team values? Those are two of them that we try to live every day. And I'd encourage other CMOs to think that way as well.
Well, Chip, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate what you're doing, and great questions. And thanks again.
All right. Well, we wish the best of luck for you and Insightly, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in the digital content sphere. How about that?
Appreciate it. I'll see you next time.